Welcome back to the PFF NFL show here in Mobile, Alabama. For our recap of the Senior Bowl, it's after day 3, so it's the final day of practice here at the Senior Bowl. Dalton, Wasserman, Max Chadwick, Trevor Sikkema here with you guys to recap everything that we saw. We're going to do the same thing that we have over the last couple of days. Obviously, if you guys have tuned in, you're used to this. 3 prospects from each of us, but then also some thoughts overall, some general winners, some guys that maybe we were a little bit disappointed with, and just have some overall Senior Bowl thoughts. Guys, how are we feeling? Hopefully we don't get any boy, the sun cooked you guys comments, because it was a little bit more cloudy today. So
I would still find a way to get burned. I would still find a way. No, it was actually a lot better today, though. I didn't get burned that bad. I'm recovering right now. But, yeah, it was a fun day of Senior Bowl.
That's good. I'm happy for you. I really am. Dalton, how we doing?
I'm just hoping these cleanup crews don't sweep us on out of here before we're done, honestly.
I know. They're good at their job, and I'm afraid they might be too good. Yeah. They might shut the show down. So we're going to run as long as we possibly can. We're going to get into it right away. Let's talk about some of these players that really stood out today. Like we said, we'll go 3 for 3. 3 guys from Dalton, 3 guys from Max, 3 guys from myself. Dalton, I'll have you bat and lead off here. Who's the guy that you want to shout out here as a big winner from day 3 of the Senior Bowl?
I'll go back to this morning's practice with Arkansas edge defender Landon Jackson. And he's a guy who kind of was losing some one-on-one reps earlier in the week. He kind of leans towards his skill set being in the run game, a little bit better than his pass rush arsenal right now. But I thought in the team period, especially down here in the red zone, Jackson did a great job setting the edge, taking on blocks, really couldn't get the run going to his side. And that showed he had the 3rd best run defense grade during the season among edge defenders in the FBS. So I think just the power that he plays with, the length that he plays with, he may not be a first-round pick with his pass rush game still developing, but as a run defender today, he was really, really good. And I think that's where you're going to get. I think he's still probably a second-round type prospect, but a high-floor, early-down run defender who you can work on the pass rush moves with, get that first step a little bit better off the edge. Then you get him playing late on third downs, maybe later in his career, his 2nd, 3rd year going as you develop that. But I thought in run defense in the team period, I know they were playing in shells, but he's one of those guys just really, really physical. He showed that all year with Arkansas, and I thought he showed really well today.
Yeah, Landon Jackson really impressed me as well. I mean, the run defense is trump card, right? And in a deep edge class that we have this year, it's important to have that trump card. So, yeah, the pass rush, like Dalton said, is still a work in progress right now, but I was also impressed with Landon Jackson today. He's just an explosive player, and at least he's got that working for him as a pass rusher, and as a run defender, he's one of the best run defending edges that we have in the draft right now.
Yeah, it feels very elementary to say it like this, but he kind of just looks like an NFL player, right? Yeah. I mean, like, he's got the size, he's got the length, he's somebody that you could play as a 5 technique defensive end and even fronts. You can kick him inside as a 4-eye, odd fronts. He's just got so much versatility. It's kind of hard to think that a guy like Landon Jackson would make it out of the 2nd round. Now, I don't think he's going to be a first-round pick, but he seems almost like a 2nd-round lock, because it's weird to kind of say that because we don't even know who the first-round picks are going to be. But it just feels, when you look at, okay, what the ceiling might be, how high the ceiling might be, but then how high the floor might be, he's somebody that you feel like could just play in the NFL for a long, long time. And I didn't see that, like, extra juice that would have been like, oh, okay, like, now I got to really vault him up into the first-round category. Perhaps he makes it into there, because I've heard some people talk about him as a late first-round pick, but I didn't see those kinds of, like, eye-popping pass rush moves from him. But the rest of it was a lot of what I expected to see. When I say that, I mean in a good way from Landon Jackson.
I think you see in this setting guys whose primary, the best part of their game is run defense. They're going to look better in those team periods, and that's really when you have to look for them when you go back and watch. Just one-on-ones, you want to show off, obviously, the speed rush and the counter moves and the inside moves and all of that, but you don't really get that feel in one-on-ones in run defense, right? You have to have the whole thing going. You have to be able to get off, certain blocks, and offensive linemen trying to execute their assignments and everything like that. But especially for a guy like that, for teams looking, I think, in those 4-3 fronts, those 4-down fronts, that they really need a strong side defensive end to be the really good run defender. I think Jackson's an ideal fit there.
Donnie in the chat, which if you're watching the show, get in on the chat. Ask us about some of the Senior Bowl players that we've seen. Obviously, it's hard to get eyes on all of them. So if we have some thoughts on some of these players, we'll be sure to give them to you outside of the guys that we're mentioning here on our own. He said, the fact that my edge 11, who I think he's talking about is Landon Jackson being the 11th best edge rusher in the class, is a 2nd-round lock, just shows how deep the class is, and I think that that's a pretty good way to encapsulate it. I have Landon Jackson a little bit higher on my list than edge 11, but to his point, point, I mean, it feels like it's just a super deep edge rush group this year.
It feels like in past drafts, Landon Jackson might even sneak into the first round. But Donnie's right. It is such a deep edge group this year that, yeah, he might slip to the second round, but he's still a very, very good football player.
So somebody in the chat is asking about Kyle Williams, the wide receiver from Washington State. I didn't know a ton about him coming into this event, and he showcased some pretty good speed. I mean, honestly, like getting off the line of scrimmage, the quickness in his releases, getting deep down the field. So he's somebody that I didn't know a lot about coming into this event, but he's somebody who popped for me where it's like, okay, now I got to go back to some full games of his, make sure I get him on the mock draft simulator, because I think this guy was able to stand out a little bit.
And the fact that he popped for you in this setting is really impressive, because Kyle Williams, his trump card is his yak ability. And you can't really show off that at the Senior Bowl, right? So he's one of the best receivers in the country after the catch this year for Wazoo. And the fact that he still popped as a route runner, I think it was really, really critical for him this week.
He was a guy that I thought looked a little bit anxious on Tuesday and got better as the week went on.
Which
you really started to see him calm down yesterday, get really crisp into his routes, and he had another good day today. And I think in the NFL, he's going to be probably a slot-only type of guy, kind of like he was at Washington State. But for him to get some work on the outside and show off the route-running chops and get better as the week went on, it was a good week for him.
We got a couple more questions, and we'll get to these throughout the show, so I wanted to make sure that I didn't that I let you guys know that I see him, and we'll get to him. But Max, who is your second guy who really stood out for you here on day 3?
So I wanted to shout out a guy who's had a rough first couple days, but he didn't let that compound into a rough week, and that was Jalen Milroe, the quarterback from Alabama.
All right.
And I think one of the most important traits for a quarterback to have is short-term memory. And you saw Jalen Milroe come out here, looked way more settled down, I thought, today than he did in the last 2 days. He showed off better pocket presence today than the last couple days as well, better anticipation, better delivery. I was more impressed. It wasn't a perfect day from Jalen Milroe, but, like I said, it was a rough first couple days for a guy that a lot of people think could be the number 3 quarterback in the draft, and a lot of people have as a first-round pick in this draft.
Yeah.
He looked more settled down today, and I thought that was big for him, honestly, because, like I said, the first 2 days weren't great, but he looked more settled down and calmed down today and showed off a little bit better accuracy than I thought we would expect from him.
It's nice to see him not unravel, of course. Now,
Yeah.
I think that, I want to speak for you guys. I'd love to hear your opinion as well. Milroe kind of just looked like an extension of his Alabama tape this week, and we were hoping that you get into this event and, all right, think he's able to take a second, step back after the season, calm down a little bit, but a lot of the issues that we saw at Alabama were still here in Mobile, and he's just a fastball thrower right now. Like, we need to see him tempo that. We need to see a little changeup in there, okay? Throw or throttle down the throwing motion a little bit, have a little bit more touch in your passes, anticipate a little bit better, and then there were just some accuracy and decision issues for him all week long. But it was nice to see him. I agree with you. Not that we're trying to, throw him a participation trophy or anything, but it was nice to see him not unravel and get worse as the week went on or compound things, because I think mentally this dude's got it. Like, he's somebody who is a leader, like you mentioned. He is somebody who will give you the best that he's got all the time. The work ethic is great. I think the mindset is great. How he approaches the game is great. It's just these technical things that he has to be much better at when it comes to the play-by-play differences at the NFL level.
No, absolutely. And I think, it even started a little bit shaky today, I thought, in the early periods, but it got better as the team periods went on. And what you saw was a process a little bit better when it got late in the play, right? In the past, we see Milroe run so much, and you don't want to take that away from him. In this setting, it's a little bit taken away from him with the red jersey and just the all-star environment. But I think he had a better plan to get to his checkdowns today to really find somebody open from within the pocket as a second and third read. So I think the process got better as today went on. And, he's a guy I think it's going to be very closely watched when it comes to Saturday in the game. Can he carry that process that he had in the second half of today's practice into that game?
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, the one thing I really love seeing from him, he's more decisive today. And usually, after a rough couple days of practice, you would think maybe his confidence would be shot a little bit, and he didn't look shot at all. Like, he literally looked a lot more confident today and looked very decisive, which is very critical for his game, because there are some times where he hesitates too much, I think, back there. Today looked way more decisive, and like I said, accuracy was better. I thought overall it was a pretty solid day from Jalen Milroe.
Yeah, I'm coming away this week thinking this is not a first-round pick type of a quarterback. But I'm also not ready to totally give up on this player. So to me, he remains sort of that project quarterback that you're probably taking in the mid-round range. I mean, Max, you brought this up before. I think the conversation is similar to what we had with Malik Willis, where going into the pre-draft process, some people thought that he was going to go as high as number 2 overall. He ends up going in the 3rd round. We see him when he was thrown out there early on with the Tennessee Titans, he just wasn't ready for it. And now we're seeing him okay with the Packers. It's a better situation, a little bit better of a situation. He gets to work with Matt LaFleur, and he looked more confident, even for sort of what he was. And so that, to me, is sort of the conversation that we really need to be having with Jalen Milroe. And so to me, this is not a first-round caliber type of quarterback, but somebody third round, early fourth round that you could take a chance on because he's got the tools that maybe you think can develop and be a weapon there. Real quick, in the chat, I want to hit this one before I go to my first guy. Junior Tafuna from Utah, the defensive lineman, another guy that I didn't know a ton about coming into this event. I'm wondering if you guys touched on him at all throughout the college football season, just with Utah's games or anything, but he had 2 very nice run stuffing reps in this day 3 of practice. So I'm glad that this question was answered today because we got, I think, probably his 2 best plays that we saw from this week.
And honestly, he was great today. But if you don't know, we grade all of the Senior Bowl practices, and over the first 2 days of practice, Junior Tafuna was one of the highest graded defensive players that we had.
Love it.
So a great week overall for Junior Tafuna, a guy that I personally didn't watch too much tape of, honestly. I'm going to have to go back and watch some more because I thought he had a great Senior Bowl week.
It's what they teach at Utah, fundamentally sound run defense, and it fits, most of the guys that come here generally from that school. That's absolutely what he showed today. Another guy, like you mentioned, Trev, when you get into those run defense guys, they're a lot better in those team periods, and when they can pop in those team periods, they can really show out.
Xavier Restrepo is the first guy that I want to talk about here because, I think that
stole him from me.
I think what, Xavier Restrepo?
Absolutely.
What do you mean?
I could talk about Restrepo every day. You already know.
Well, then I'm just teeing you up again here. We can have a good chat, So, look, I think that Restrepo was able to stand out day 1 because he's a great route runner. He's a very natural route runner. You're going up against defensive backs who, some of them, Dalton, you and I talked about this when we were watching practice in the stands. It's really tough for zone corners to come into this event and look good because you are basically just putting a lot of man coverage situations. Whether it's the 1-on-1s, the 7-on-7s, even sometimes the team drills. I mean, they really want to see you in man coverage and see if you can play that cat coverage, if you will. I got this cat, I'm going to cover him, and I'm going to make sure he doesn't touch the football. So for Xavier Restrepo, he's going up against corners that really aren't ready for his savviness. And day 1, he really stood out in that regard. But I love the fact that he was able to stand out on day 3 as well, because day 3 is a big red zone day for this event. On day 3, one of the teams, they're wearing, shells and shorts, they're not wearing full pads, but they're practicing a lot of red zone stuff. And for Restrepo, I think we all love to talk about size in the red zone, right? We like to, he's a red zone threat. He's a red zone target because he's a big wide receiver. Being a great red zone threat doesn't just come from you being tall. It also comes from you finding a way to create separation in small environments. And Xavier Restrepo is that kind of a player. And we saw another really nice rep for him where it was a crossing route and he was kind of in between 2 defenders and just veers a little bit more towards the back of the end zone where he's got a little bit of space, catches a touchdown. But that is what Xavier Restrepo is all about. He is such a smart football player, and I just love the fact that he not only showed up on day 1 with that route running, but also day 3 in the red zone period to showcase he's just a true all-around weapon.
I think you mentioned something that I really like with a few guys in this draft, and Restrepo's one of them, is comfort in tight spaces, right? And it doesn't get any tighter than in the end zone, and I even love the way that he has a real focus on his footwork when it comes to the end line, in the back of the end zone, or even making sideline catches anywhere on the field. There's just a spatial awareness about him between finding defenders and how to work those zone coverages, like you mentioned, which you saw a decent amount of today, and then working in the end zone and just even making those slight adjustments. He's one of those quarterback-friendly receivers, right? You need one of those down there, and they can't all be Mike Evans, right? They can't all just be 6'5" fade ball guys, and Restrepo obviously isn't that. He's got route running savvy, like you mentioned. He's so comfortable in tight spaces. I think the 2 guys that I think about in this class like that are him and Emeka Egbuka. They're just so darn comfortable in tight spaces that you're not afraid to throw a guy like that the football in those windows.
Emeka Egbuka, Tez Johnson, they're all like a quarterback's best friend, honestly. I think it gets underrated when talking about Cam Ward, because Cam Ward at Wazoo was a gunslinger, right? And then when he gets to Miami, much more conservative and way more efficient as well. I think a big part of that is Xavier Restrepo just always presenting an open target for Cam Ward as well. So Restrepo, I think, is one of the more underrated players we have in this draft, and I would absolutely take him in somewhere on day 2 of the draft.
Walt in the chat is very true saying this. Walt's correct here. It's easy for wide receivers to stand out at this event. What about some corners? Walt, we're going to get to the corners. We're going to highlight a couple of them today. And Dalton yesterday talked about Quincy Riley, the cornerback from Louisville, who had a really good day on day 2, showcased a lot of really good man coverage ability, outside cornerback ability. So that was a guy that we shouted out earlier this week. But we're going to get to a couple of corners. Before we get to that, this podcast is brought to you by our friends over at Cherry Bundy. They are the performance drink that is fueling the Healthlete revolution. It's a great product. Natural products, natural ingredients, no added sugar to it. The tart cherries that it's made with, It's the highest antioxidant fruit or vegetable in the world, which means it's got all sorts of benefits to it. Helps increase recovery, support immunity, naturally occurring melatonin to help you sleep, and it reduces the soreness that you have. If you are active at all whatsoever, whether it's a walk around the neighborhood or you're doing CrossFit or training for marathons, whatever it is, they've got products to be able to help you feel your best and perform your best. Used by nearly 500 collegiate and professional sports teams, 10 of the last 11 Super Bowl champions. Every single team that's played, overseas in Europe or Brazil in the NFL this season has had Cherry Bundy with them. I've tried the product myself. I absolutely love it. You can go over to cherrybundy.com, check out everything that they have to offer. You can also find them on Amazon. Retailers nationwide also have them, so you can check your local Publix, Kroger, whatever your local grocery store is, so you can check if they have it. But if not, you go over to cherrybundy.com, and if you use the promo code PFF20, you get yourself 20% off all orders over at cherrybundy.com. So make sure you go and check them out. Dalton, who you got next?
So you have one Miami Hurricane that we talked about all week, and
it's been a Miami week.
It's been a Miami kind of week down in Mobile, hasn't it? We talked about Xavier Restrepo a couple of times now. Elijah Arroyo had a great week.
Yep.
Damian Martinez, I know, is one of your favorite backs, and I got to get to another guy staying in the trenches, Jalen Rivers. I was really impressed. I think, we saw him at Miami this year, especially had an injury early in the season, missed a handful of games, came back and rotated between left tackle and left guard in games, right? And in their last 6-7 games, and Miami obviously had a great year. We talk about Cam Ward in the offense, but he was a valuable piece for them, and he's come out here and I think really embraced what's going to be his full-time role as a guard in the NFL. And I thought he had another great day. He was playing right guard in the team period. He was getting to the second level. He showed some good power in short areas and getting up to linebackers. He was really good in pass protection today, especially with all the play-action concepts that their offense was running. I think Jalen Rivers is somebody who's going to give a team some really good interior offensive line depth with what he showed. He was moving around earlier in the week. We saw him some at tackle and then at guard, but as the week went on, we saw him more and more at guard and producing more at guard. I think one of the themes between guys flipping inside and then just getting kind of that infusion of talent, right? We've talked about Gray Zabel, Wyatt Milam, now Jalen Rivers is another one where we were not sure at all what this interior offensive line class looked like. Now we got a whole boatload of talent in there because so many guys, so many tackles have moved inside and played well, and Rivers is one of them. I think, look, he's probably something, what would you say, maybe like an early day 3 pick right now, but I think he's a solid depth add right now, especially with the way he looked at guard this week.
And yeah, there's a lot of players who came in as tackles who have sort of shifted inside. Oh my God, I just thought the Jonah Savanaia rep where it was the competition period, he's lined up at guard. Was it Tim Smith?
Yeah.
Who showed Tim Smith from Alabama. They're like, all right, one-on-one. And Big Jonah is, that's his nickname for a reason. One, because his name is very long, but also because he's huge. He's 340 pounds. You go, okay, this player, he played at offensive tackle, but he's got more of the shape of an offensive guard, so they moved him into guard for this competition period. And Tim Smith from Alabama, first of all, they called his name, and it feels like, everybody's like, where'd he go? Did he go in the locker room? Where is this guy? And so then he kind of comes out of the crowd, straps the helmet on, just goes up to the line really quick. Didn't have a lot of time to probably think about what he was going to do, so he goes, all right, I'm going to just run through this guy's chest real quick. And 340 absolutely bulldozed him. So I don't know what, I just wanted to say that to the people. That was one of my favorite plays that I saw because Tim Smith was somebody that I'm not going to talk about here just to highlight individually, but he was almost on my list to do that because I remember day one, he was also, it was like, all right, this dude from Alabama is actually standing out pretty well. We haven't heard a lot about him throughout the season. So Tim Smith, another day 3 interior defensive lineman that I think had a good week. But yeah, just going to your Jalen Rivers point, there's been a lot of players, Emory Jones, him obviously kicking inside and seeing what they can do at guard. I think Rivers has really showed a really good week with him playing as an interior spot, which is good.
Yeah, and this interior offensive line class, so many of them are offensive tackles making the transition to interior offensive line. And we've seen some guys at the Senior Bowl, like Wyatt Milam, not have the best week making that transition. A guy like Jalen Rivers, though, seamless. He made it look seamless. So, yeah, I'm a big fan of Jalen Rivers. He's been at Miami forever, playing the offensive line there forever. So it's really good to see him kind of move from tackle, where he's been playing for so long for the Hurricanes, into the inside now, some of the best D tackles that we have in the country, and still holding his own. We have a question. Okay, and this is a great question. You talked about offensive tackles that could move inside. Who are the guys that are true offensive tackles in this class? I think Ozzie Trapillo is one at this event who built like an offensive tackle, plays like an offensive tackle. I thought he had a really solid week this week. Ariante Ursery, I thought, played pretty well for the most part. I haven't gone back to watch every single rep, but I thought he played well. The other one,
a guy who I thought was a shoo-in to move the guard, Anthony Belton from NC State.
He looked fantastic.
I did not think that this guy, I thought this was one of the easiest tackle to guard projections that we were going to have. And he's been great at guard. But the couple of reps that I've seen from him at tackle, he's holding his own. The footwork and just the balance is way better than you think for a player of his size. Super impressed from NC State's Anthony Belton, which kind of goes in line with, I was at Shrine Bowl last week, and Tim McKay, their interior offensive lineman, was another guy who I thought really stood out at that event. So shout out to NC State and their offensive line. Those guys are really showing out here. But those are a couple of the guys that I thought, all right, these are tackles that I think can stay at tackle at the NFL level.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think another guy, real quick, too, is Josh Connerly. We can't forget about him either. And I know the Mike Green highlight yesterday kind of put him on the spot, but for the most part, he had a really good week as well. He's going to stay out there.
No, I was going to say Connolly's great, but Anthony Belton's a guy I've been blown away by. This week, I got shout him out on day 1, so I couldn't shout him out on the day 2 or day 3 show because I don't want to repeat, but he has been unbelievable, honestly, these last couple days of practice as well. I mean, he's, 340 pounds, and the way he moves at that size, and 36-inch arms as well. I think you can play either tackle or guard in the NFL, which makes him even more valuable for an NFL franchise. So, Anthony Belton has been stonewalling dudes all week.
Noel is asking this. This is a guy that you know very well. Syracuse running back LaQuinton Allen Jr. He looked, the last couple of days, he's played pretty dang well. I think he's really good as a wide receiver, really good third down back, showed pretty good pass protection reps today as well. So, he is somebody who, I think that it was probably under talked about, honestly, from my angle as well on NFLSC. We didn't get to him when we did the running back rankings, but feels like he has just got the skill set of a third down back at the NFL.
Well, and I don't blame him for not talking about him because it was kind of a surprise to everyone in the Syracuse community when he declared for the NFL draft, right? Because he had a good year at Syracuse this past year, but it was a very pass-happy team, and you thought, okay, if he comes back for another year, also it's a loaded running back class in the 2025 draft, maybe he could really emerge in the 2026 running back class. But he's proving out here, I actually should be a part of this loaded running back group. And you mentioned it, the third down ability as a pass blocker and as a receiver, that is what made him so good at Syracuse, and that's really what's going to hang his hat on in the NFL.
Max, your next guy. I think we're starting the corner conversation here.
I got to talk about my guy, Azareye'h Thomas. And you mentioned before the red zone work. Well, that really is where he's going to be excelling out here, just in a condensed formation out there. Because Azareye'h Thomas, if you don't know, is a very press man corner, and he was dominant out here today. He had an interception, a pass breakup. I love him in a press man scheme. I think that his ball skills are incredible. His movement ability at that size is really good as well. Azareye'h Thomas, again, he's not going to fit every team, but if you're a team that runs a lot of press man coverage, Azareye'h Thomas would be one of my top corners in the draft, and I think could be an early second-round pick.
Man, these Florida State dudes, back-to-back years, right? Because last year, Shrine Bowl was Renardo Green. It was Jerrion Jones. Now at the Senior Bowl this year, we got Azareye'h Thomas, and these are just press coverage types of corners, and it was great. I think you explained it very well. It was great to see him stand out as that man coverage type of a corner.
It feels like a Brian Flores kind of guy, right? Like anybody
that likes to get real aggressive.
Just really aggressive, high blitzing, maybe even an Aaron Glenn, somebody like that who likes to blitz and play a lot of man coverage. I think he's probably still going to go on day 2. It was a good bounce-back day for him for sure, because I thought he struggled. And some of the reps that he struggled with, when we talk about, struggling with a Tez Johnson, he's not going to cover guys like Tez Johnson. No. He's going to play on the outside. He's not going to cover those shifty slot receivers, but I think you'd like to see him on those goal line fades and vertical routes really compete. He's going to be a guy expected to get up and press bigger, more physical receivers. I think he can do that as long as he goes to a team that has his skill set in his wheelhouse.
And one of my favorite things about Azareye'h Thomas this week was, yes, you mentioned before, on day 1, Tez Johnson got him a couple times out there. Yep. And I know there's probably a lot of corners out there that did not want to guard Tez Johnson, but I saw an interview, I forgot which reporter asked him this question, but they asked him about Tez Johnson. He goes, I cannot wait to cover him tomorrow. He goes, I want to get revenge on that guy tomorrow. So just the fact that he didn't want to avoid Tez Johnson, because
I love it.
They're playing for money right now, these guys out here this week. And the fact that he wants to go against the best and showcase that he is the best as well, I love that mentality from Azareye'h Thomas.
Somebody in the chat is asking about Omar Norman Lott getting hurt. If he got back out there, I did not see him after he got hurt on day 1. I saw him walk through the tunnel on day 1. Most of the practice was done, but I didn't see him yesterday, and I don't believe I saw him today. Then somebody else was asking about Jamal Pritchett. I don't know if you guys have seen much of him, but do you have any thoughts on him from what you've seen this week? I didn't get a lot of eyes.
I didn't watch him too much this week, but I could tell you that he's another guy like Kyle Williams is incredible after the catch. I believe he led the nation in yards after the catch this season at South Alabama, which is playing in his home stadium right now as well. So Jamal Pritchett is a guy that his tape is really fun to watch because he just breaks tackles pretty much all the time.
So Jackson Hawes is the next guy that I want to bring to the table, the Georgia Tech tight end. And we had a question in the chat just talking about the tight end class overall. Dalton, you and I were sitting in the stands talking about the tight ends. Man, it was just a really great week for tight ends. And I think that Jackson Hawes is one of them. He's known as one of, if not the best blocking tight end that we have in the class. Maybe him and Tyler Warren, right? I think going toe-to-toe for that title there because he's got that size. He's got that type of a frame. And that's just also how he approaches the game. But you wondered, okay, he's a blocking tight end. Does he give you anything in the receiving game? And it's just been so low production for him. And then I went back and I watched his film for the tight end episode that we were doing on NFLSE. And it's not just that he didn't really get a lot of looks. He also just didn't look super comfortable. He didn't look super coordinated when it came to just coming down with regular catches. But I'm not going to lie. Here this week, looked a lot more confident, a lot more natural than I thought he was going to look as a pass catcher, and including there was in the red zone period, which he could thrive in the red zone, right, as somebody who's going to be able to line up in heavy formations for teams. He had a corner out to the back pylon that was straight over the shoulder. Great grab through contact to the corner or the linebacker who I think was trying to get his arm around and knock that thing out of his hands, and it was just a really great contested catch. It's like, man, you give me more of that. Mm-hmm. You go from being like a 5th, 6th round pick to all of a sudden, like, remember Tip Ryman went in the 3rd round last year, and everybody was like, okay, this is just a blocking tight end. Now, I think Tip Ryman's a better athlete than Jackson Hawes was, but now you're talking about more of a priority day 3 pick because of everything that a good blocking tight end can do for your offense. So I was very impressed with Jackson Hawes today.
I think even if he's going to be a 5th or 6th round pick with kind of that low receiving ceiling, this isn't a guy who's going to catch 80, 90 balls a year, right? When I was watching Jackson Hawes tape, both back in his days, I believe at Yale and then at Georgia Tech, I was just like, every team needs one of these. He's kind of got a guard's mentality in a tight end's body, and he just doesn't let up, right? And I think this is a setting for a blocking tight end that's not always the best. You want to see the fundamentals, especially in the team drills. We've talked about the run game already, but I think he's somebody where you flip on the tape and you just go, I need one of those. I can just do a little bit more for 15 to 20 snaps a game when I have a guy like Jackson Hawes, goal line, short yardage. Guys like Dan Campbell love their tight ends and putting extra tight ends out there, and he's kind of a guy at tight end who functions a bit as an extra offensive lineman as opposed to having to put a 6 offensive lineman out there. But if he can put a little more into the receiving game, like you mentioned you saw today, then it's not a 6 offensive lineman. This is a legitimate 2-way threat.
Yep. Yeah, run blocking is a lost art, I think, for tight ends nowadays, honestly. And he's a guy that absolutely...
It can be in scouting for sure.
Yes.
I think everybody gets very obsessed with the receiving tight ends, and obviously we see what a guy like Brock Bowers can do for your offense, but I agree with you. I think it's a really good point.
And honestly, I think like A.J. Barner is like that kind of mold that you want to see out of him. And I think we saw, it wasn't today, but yesterday, Jackson Hawes made a one-handed catch yesterday, right?
He did. Today? I think it was somewhere out in the flat, that it was a ball a little bit high, and he had to...
It's an eye-opening week for Jackson Hawes. For a guy like, I'm with you. I did not see much in the receiving game, but he had to do it more out here today and last week, and he's done a really good job at it.
It's been a great weekend for tight ends, I think, overall.
Yeah.
Obviously, we mentioned Jackson Hawes here. I think Mason Taylor's looked really good. Obviously, Elijah Arroyo, who had an absolutely hilarious play today where he catches a red zone touchdown and then immediately just punts the ball, and it's like, buddy, this isn't an NFL game. We need that ball. Like, somebody's got to go fetch that ball because we got to be able to practice with it. Not that they only got one, but it was just it was a very funny sequence there. But Dalton, we were talking about a little bit earlier, just having to reshuffle the tight end rankings after this week.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to reshuffle it big time. I think you had some risers, and I thought it was just an okay week for Harold Fannin Jr. I don't think he stood out from the group. And a guy I was really impressed with too. I hope I'm saying this right. Maliki Madavao from UCLA.
Dude can move.
How smooth he is at 265, and Terrence Ferguson from Oregon as well.
Yeah.
I think we're gonna see some serious reshuffling in the tight end rankings, even all the way up to tight end 3, figuring out who that guy is going to be because so many of them had really good weeks.
Destino Cannon in the chat was asking, how did Dillon Gabriel look for you guys? Is he exactly what you thought, or maybe did his arm pop a little bit more than you might have expected? Any thoughts on Dillon Gabriel?
So he was functional, he was accurate, and I think the one big thing for me, especially that I saw today, is, and this has been a theme throughout his career, you saw him struggle a bit more in the red zone. Between the 20s, you even go back and look at the grading and the statistics. Between the 20s, fantastic, been a really good passer throughout his college career, and he looked good. I think especially throwing some of those intermediate balls and getting to his second and third read, he looked really good. But I was curious to see him in the red zone period today, and that's when he started to struggle a bit. It's throwing into those tight end, into those tight windows windows that we talked about, like before with Xavier Restrepo.
Yeah.
Gabriel has a harder time driving the ball into those windows, right? And that's going to be the big thing for me. When you watch his tape, to me, the biggest actual weakness other than any of the tools and, or lack thereof is, can he throw balls into those windows in the red zone, in the end zone, right? Because that's where he struggled the most in this 3-day period. He was one of the better quarterbacks here, but that's the part I look at and I go, that's the kryptonite on the field.
It wasn't the best day for him, but one thing I was impressed by when I was watching yesterday's tape back was that his anticipation and timing is outstanding. And in an event like this, when you don't work with most of these receivers for the entire season, timing is really hard. And the fact that he was able to get balls out on time to those receivers, even before they came out of their breaks, I thought was really impressive. So, yeah, he's a very accurate quarterback. He's a very decisive quarterback. I think Dillon Gabriel was maybe the best one this week. It wasn't a great week for quarterbacks overall, but like I said, this past day, like Dalton said, was not great for him. But overall, I was pretty impressed by Dillon Gabriel.
I agree. I think that through the first 2 days specifically, and it's a lot of stuff that's, like Dalton was saying, was between the 20s, he was the best quarterback, and he plays such a clean brand of quarterback, right? You're not really going to rattle this guy. There's not a lot that he has not seen. There's not a lot that he hasn't seen and doesn't know how to immediately adjust to it, even with brand new wide receivers. And so I'm just very fascinated to see what the NFL thinks of Dillon Gabriel and where he's going to go, because the measurables would tell you he's a 6th, 7th round pick.
Yeah.
But how he approaches the game, the success that he has had at Oklahoma and at Oregon, and again, just how clean and well this guy understands how to win mentally at the position would tell you that he's more of like a 3rd round pick. So I don't know where he's going to get drafted, but I really do like Dillon Gabriel as this sort of backup quarterback type of a play. I cannot remember who we were talking about with this, but I love the idea of the Dolphins drafting him to back up Tua, because not only do you now have the lefties, right? So there's no change between the practices or if one guy has to come in, but it's also like if Tua, who has gone through injuries before in his career, were to miss some time, you don't feel bad about throwing, or you don't get worried about throwing Dillon Gabriel out there. He has seen all of these things. He's not going to get rattled. So even if you're only putting him out there for 2 games, it's not like he's going to get overwhelmed. It's not like it's like, all right, well, I need these 2 games to be an acclimation period or something. So somebody, I cannot remember who it was. I'm sorry. I want to give you credit for it, but they were talking about Tua and the Dolphins situation and Gabriel being a backup quarterback for them, and I actually really do like that.
I think so. There's been a lot of noise this week about Jalen Milroe and Jackson Dart because they're so polarizing, but I think off to the side of that story has been the fact that Dillon Gabriel and Riley Leonard this week, I think, become very easily projectable as functional backups, right? You mentioned it. We don't know if it'll be round 3, round 4, round 5, where that may be, but I think those are the 2 guys that stood out to me the most in this setting of like, okay, they are functioning in this style of offense. They are functioning with, getting under center and turning their back to the line of scrimmage and then making throws from under center. They're the 2 guys I thought that functioned the best, getting further into the progression of the 2nd and 3rd read, especially Gabriel. He was the one that came in here with the most the well thought out plan of like, okay, work the front side read 1-2 and then get backside to the 3rd.
Yep.
Those are the 2 guys to me. I go, okay, they're at least functional backups and something you can work with. Gabriel and Leonard both had good weeks.
All right, guys, question. Have you played Pick 6 from DraftKings yet? Because if you haven't, you are running out of time. We got 1 game left. It's a big game. It's a Super Bowl. And as the official daily fantasy sports partner of the NFL, DraftKings does fantasy sports like no one else. You can play for better payouts on Pick 6. Whole thing is very easy to get started. You select 2 or more players and just say if they will have more or less of a single stat. Could be receptions, receiving yards, rushing touchdowns, passing touchdowns, tackle sacks, whatever it is. Pick 6 available in most states: Georgia, California, Texas, Missouri, so many more. And if you haven't played DraftKings yet, well, make it sweeter for first-time users. New Pick 6 customers, you play $5 on your first Pick 6 set. You get $50 in Pick 6 credits. This matchup's obviously a big one between the Kansas City Chiefs and the Philadelphia Eagles. Saquon Barkley's been going off the entire season. If you think it's going to be more of the same against Steve Spagnuolo and that defense, you probably slam more on whatever the rushing attempts or rushing numbers are going to be for Saquon Barkley. But if you think if Steve Spagnuolo is going to have the kryptonite for whatever the Philadelphia Eagles rushing offense has been, maybe you'll say less. But that's just one example. You can go check them all out. Win more cash at Pick 6. Download the DraftKings Pick 6 app now. Use that promo code PFF. That's promo code PFF to play $5 and get $50 in Pick 6 credits. Only on DraftKings Pick 6. The crown is yours. If you got a gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. Help is available for problems with gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org in Connecticut. Must be 18 plus. Age and eligibility restrictions do vary by jurisdiction. Pick 6 not available everywhere, including New York and Ontario. Void where prohibited, 1 per new customer. Bonuses awarded as non-withdrawable Pick 6 credits. They expire in 30 days. Limited time offer. See terms at pick6.draftkings.com/promos. Shout out to Bo Nix and Mike Penix. Getting in on the show. Didn't think we'd get Bo Nix and Mike Penix in the show, but we did here.
For a moment, I was like, wait, they're not playing Saturday. What are we doing? That was I had a flashback a little bit. I was like, they're not supposed to be here.
The sound system works. Maybe because, they wanted to see a little bit more from the quarterbacks. Maybe they're bringing it back. Like an alumni game. Maybe they're doing the alumni game before the actual game. I don't know. Dalton, who's your last guy that you're going to kind of bring to the table?
So I spent the last practice today really honing in on the linebackers because I hadn't gotten too locked in on them the last 2 days. You mentioned Demetrius Knight yesterday, which is a really good shout out. I'm going to mention another guy, Notre Dame's Jack Kiser. And I think, first of all, again, one of the 3 guys for Notre Dame that's here after playing in the national title game 10 days ago. But, I just think he's come out here and proven himself as one of the better linebackers in this draft. And look, in 2023, he was the 2nd highest graded linebacker in the country. Had kind of a rotational role. I think played less than 400 snaps. Like, you knew it was there and you knew he was really athletic and he can be a weapon for any defense. This year, full-time role, starting middle linebacker for the Irish and over 700 snaps and was still in the top 20 of grading. Now he brings it out to the Senior Bowl. We saw he had the interception on Jalen Milroe yesterday, and I think there was a rep to me that defined him really as, I think, one of the better coverage linebackers in this class. And he was in a one-on-one. I forget who the running back was going against him. They were running an option route. He broke it out towards the sideline. Kiser, his ability to explode out of his breaks isn't quite elite. That first step to explode out of it and really adjust to the route, to the top of the route, isn't great. It's more good than great, but the top end speed and his awareness, his football IQ, and his ability to track the football. So he takes this out route. He's about a step behind, and he uses that speed to catch up and break up a pass. And I was like, that's it right there. It's straight line speed, it's football IQ, and he does a great job tracking the ball, and he's just aware of what quarterbacks want to do. I think he had a really good day in zone coverage during the team drill, especially as the Tampa 2 guy. I think that's something that could be a comfortable spot for him, opening his hips, turning and running down the seam, getting back to a secondary read on the backside. His agility is more B minus, but the straight line speed to make up for it, and the fact, and you mentioned this yesterday too, he's always ahead. He's a step ahead. He sees it. Then he gets in the run game, and I see him bench pressing tight ends and clogging the C gap and forcing cutbacks. I'm like, I just think he's come out here and proven that he's a really well-rounded player, a mid-round player, maybe a third-round type of player, mid to late day 2. But I think Jack Kiser, he might be, I haven't ranked my linebackers yet, he might be in the top 5 linebackers for me in this class.
I love the third-round call-out. I really do. He's an NFL backer out here.
Yes.
We've talked about this throughout the last couple of days. The event, first and foremost, is to put guys in buckets. Are you a Sunday player or are you not? He is a Sunday player. And so now from there you can sort of get to the evaluations and more of the nitty-gritty that you had there. But I think he's been good as well.
He made another interception today. He has 2 on the week now, which is incredible for a linebacker.
That's got to be the most.
Anybody
have more than 2?
I don't think of anyone who
I don't know if another linebacker had any.
But I remember.
No, I just meant anybody. Anybody
yeah.
have more than 2 interceptions this week?
I don't think so.
He's probably tied for the most.
Yeah, at least tied for the most. But I remember, so the second one wasn't as impressive as the first one because it got tipped and then it fell into his lap. And I remember I was up there watching and someone said to me, oh, he was just right place, right time there. I'm like, well, that is Jack Kiser to a T.
He always is.
Always right place, right time. So just one of the smartest football players we have in this draft. I believe he had one of the highest GPAs on Notre Dame's team as well. Just an incredibly smart kid that, like you said, has been an incredibly productive player for them the last couple of years. Yet Jack Kiser, always in the right place at the right time.
Last guy, Max, who you got?
So I love the Senior Bowl because there are guys out here that don't play at the Power 4 level, and so you start to think, okay, yes, they graded out really well in our system, but how do they look against some All-Stars? Darius Alexander from Toledo was one of the highest graded defensive tackles that we had in college football this past year. He's the 2nd most valuable defensive tackle in the nation, only behind Mason Graham, who's probably going to be a top 5 pick in the NFL draft this year. Darius Alexander backed it up, I thought, today in the one-on-ones and in the 11-on-11s as well. He's such a quick player at 304 pounds. I thought he was dominant in one-on-ones, and he had 1 rep in 11-on-11 when he was the edge rusher against Josh Connerly Jr., who's going to be a first-round tackle, and he beat Connerly on the edge. So I think he's a very versatile defensive lineman, and it was just so cool to see a guy from the MAC, from Toledo. You think, okay, yeah, he grades out at a 90, but it's the MAC. Let's see him out here. Still grading out at a 90 in my book, at least. Darius Alexander was a dominant player today.
6'3", 300 pounds, 34-inch arms,
Yep.
massive hands. Just, again, he looks like a future NFL player, and he is somebody who I didn't get a lot of eyes on before this event, and he popped first day. Didn't see him a ton yesterday, but certainly today as well. I agree with you. Darius Alexander's been great.
Our guy Mitch Kiser's been planting the flag for him for
been,
the last month. He's been telling you got to watch Darius. You got to watch him. And I'll tell you what, the pick 6 in the bowl game too against Pitt was incredible. He's a really good athlete, and you mentioned coming off the edge. If he can show that versatility, which is becoming more and more valuable from defensive linemen, you see Chris Jones is the best at it. He can line up from any alignment. Not saying obviously he's going to be Chris Jones, but when you can have success from multiple techniques like he did today, that's absolutely somebody that coaches want.
Somebody in the chat's asking about Sebastian Castro, saying that Sebastian Castro had a really good day today. Dalton, we were chatting a little bit earlier, just a conversation with Castro, and it's a tough event for Castro to stand out because he's so good in zone. He's so good as a field defensive back, is sort of this safety slot hybrid. But I do agree with Donnie, and in chat, I think he did stand out more today than he had the last couple of days.
He did a really nice pass breakup in the end zone, and I actually got to talk to him yesterday back at the media day before I was doing a radio hit. And he's also very just very low key, very calm and cool. He's just gonna come out and take care of his business every day, and it's a big transition week for him because he's moving from slot corner to safety, right? And he had even mentioned to me like some of the roles are kind of the same, and I kind of agree when you talk about if he gets to a zone heavy team, I think even somebody like Robert Saleh going back to San Francisco, it's a similar system in coverage at least to what they run at Iowa with a boatload of quarters, right? And he can play that curl flat. He's a really good tackler. And again, it's tough to evaluate him this week because it's the first week he's ever been really working with the safeties full time, right? He was one of the best slot corners in the country, but I think there's a little bit of a struggle playing man-to-man coverage, right? He's not the athlete that Cooper DeJean was from Iowa last season. So I think in a zone-heavy system, as a quarters kind of safety who can dig his heels in and drive on in routes and make tackles, and then getting down in that curl flat area where he's so comfortable, if he goes to a defense where he can work to his strengths, he can be a good player. I think he's moving to safety because he's not quite at an NFL level when it comes to man-to-man coverage.
I'll stick along that theme with my last guy in the slot, Upton Stout from Western Kentucky. He is somebody who I was excited to see this week when Connor and I talked to Jim Nagy last week, and we said, hey, who's a guy that people aren't talking enough about, right? I mean, I know it's an easy question. It's one that he gets asked all the time, but he's like, dude, Upton Stout, honestly. This is somebody who comes from a little bit smaller of a program, doesn't get a lot of notoriety when it comes to the NFL. I know there have been a handful of players that come from there lately, but it's not like, the one that you're going to first when you're trying to build out a draft class. But Upton Stout, again, looked like a future pro out here today specifically, because when you talk about his ability in the slot, and he's smaller. He's about 5'10", 174 pounds, so he's not going to be somebody who you really want to play on the outside. I know Mike Sanders still is a small corner, and people are like, oh, Mike Sanders still, that is like, all right, Mike Sanders still, 1 is pretty special, and 2, I think that he's going to kick inside as they get more outside corners there in Washington. But Stout is built like a slot corner, and he's got the confidence and mentality when he's playing in that spot. And we saw that specifically today in the red zone period where he was going up against players that were in the slot, in the red zone. You got that two-way go ability, and, man, he was sticky in coverage. Yep. I felt as though the hands were fast, the feet were fast, the hips were fast, and he was able to stay in phase really well. He was very sticky in coverage during the red zone period, specifically the one-on-ones that I watched. And then when we got to the full field scrimmages, he had a couple of plays that he was able to fill the run pretty well, and I think that's an underrated part of playing slot as a corner. Some people look at guys and they go, okay, well, he's too small to play outside. Let's stick him inside. Well, no, you're not if he can't fit the run. You are closer to the ball. You're closer to the line of scrimmage. You got to fit the run almost better when you are inside in the slot. So that's why safeties are often the hybrid players that come down in the slot because they can fill the run a little bit better. But Stout was able to, full pun intended, be stout in the run that we saw today. I'm sorry. I know it was painful, but he was able to stand out really well. I was a big fan of his kind of coming into this event, was excited to see him, and I thought he did well today.
It reminds me of last year when we saw a big jump, I believe it was here at the Senior Bowl, from Jarvis Brownlee from Louisville, because I think a very similar player, a tough run defender, A-plus effort in the slot, maybe not the most, not the tools that are necessarily considered elite, but between the competitiveness, the run defense, and then just the want to, right, to go and cover all the top guys in a setting like this. I think it's a lot like Jarvis Brownlee, and he had a really good rookie year for Tennessee. You could see Stout move up into that same range. I think, did Brownlee go in the 3rd round? I believe he did. Pretty sure
fourth. I think
Was it in the-
Brownlee.
was it in the
I
early-
think Brownlee was a fourth.
You could see with a performance like today, somebody convince themselves, okay, he's one of those tough, hard-nosed slot corners who, like you mentioned, if you can play the run. If you can't play the run and you're playing in the slot, teams are going to attack you. They're going to motion tight ends in and make you play condensed in like a third linebacker, and they're going to come after you. If he's able to play the run at an NFL level, he could have a similar path as Brownlee.
Yeah, it's funny. You mentioned Brownlee. I felt like Quincy Riley was kind of the Brownlee of this year, right? Just being that outside man coverage corner that you highlighted yesterday. And Brownlee was somebody that was able to stand out at this event last year, get drafted in the fourth round, but had plenty of opportunities to start and make a name for himself even as a rookie with the Titans.
And I don't think it can be overstated how critical this week is, not only for all these prospects out here, but for Group of 5 prospects specifically. Because some of these Power 4 guys, if they have a bad week, you could at least say, okay, well, they played really well in the SEC, so we can go back and stand on that. For some of these Group of 5 guys, if they don't perform well at the Senior Bowl, a lot of people are going to throw out their tape altogether and say, okay, they're just not NFL players. So for a guy like Upton Stout to show, hey, I am a really good football player, like Darius Alexander as well, that is critical for them. So, yes, every prospect out here has a lot of pressure on them this week. But for those Group of 5 guys and the FCS guys in particular, showing they belong out there and showing that they are stars out here is absolutely critical.
Walt is saying in the chat, is there some reason why you guys aren't talking about Jalen Milroe's Kenny Pickett hands? Unnecessary stray there at Kenny Pickett, who is going to the Super Bowl. I will remind you, Walt.
As a Steelers fan, it might be a necessary stray.
No, okay, that's fair. No, but to Walt's point, we did talk about this day one. We talked about a lot of the measurements on the day one show, and Milroe's hands actually do mean a lot for the issues that he has, because with as twitched up as his throwing motion is, not being able to grip the football the way that you need to is an issue for him. And seeing that he had really small hands, now unfortunately you have to think about, like, man, is he just going to be inaccurate? Like, is he just going to struggle with true accuracy and ball placement? The hand use there, the hand size definitely matters more for a quarterback like Milroe, who has as twitched up and explosive of a throwing motion and not being able to control the ball as well with those smaller hands. A couple of Kentucky players. That's all for us when it comes to the players that we were going to bring up. So I'm going to hit a couple of questions in the chat. 2 Kentucky players. Somebody's asking about Deion Walker, thoughts on his week, and then Maxwell Harrison as well. I didn't get too many eyes on Harrison, so I didn't see too many plays of him. But when it came to Deion Walker, the measurables are insane. He's almost 350 pounds. He's 6'7". He's got the long arms to him. Passes the off the bus test with flying colors. He just looks like that NFL type of a guy, but lack disruption to me this week. He just was not the standout player that we thought he was going to be this season at Kentucky, and we saw some of those limitations and just a little bit of disappointment given his frame and his ability when it came to turning that into production this week. Yeah,
Deion Walker, it wasn't a great week for Deion Walker. He actually did not practice today, so that was a big thing as well. So he's a guy that it just gets too upright, I think, out of his stance at times. And obviously the pad level for him is already going to be tough considering he's 6'7" and one of the tallest players that we have out here. But he just, honestly, guys got under him. I mean, Willie Lampkin, who's a guy who's 9 inches shorter and 70 pounds lighter, was able to stonewall him a couple times. Not a great week for Deion Walker. Now his tape for the last 2 years at Kentucky is still really good and still probably will get him drafted somewhere on day 2. But I think a lot of the first round conversations that some people had with Deion Walker, that I don't think that's really there anymore.
Any thoughts on Maxwell Harrison? I didn't watch him a ton this week, so I don't know if you guys...
He was okay. I mean, I think a lot of the defensive backs had up and down weeks, and he was one of them. I think, obviously, he's going to go out and compete, and I got to study a little more of the Kentucky tape with him, too. It was a tough year overall for Kentucky, as we watched all year. But I think the same team for a lot of the defensive backs this week. There wasn't a guy who I thought stepped up, especially at corner, and played really well all 3 days. So Harrison, again, fits in with that group, made some plays, got beat on a few others. It was kind of up and down. It was a tough weekend against a really talented receiver group, understandably, right? And a lot of these drills, like you've mentioned all week, are to the advantage of the receiver, right? Yeah. When you're talking about one-on-ones and even 7-on-7. So I think he's someone we got to dig in a little more on. He's probably still in day 2 consideration. He didn't do it. I don't think he did anything to hurt his cause, but he wasn't one of the big risers from this week.
Brandon said, Deion Walker moving to offensive tackle, I'm ready to start the narrative. I mean, if it doesn't work at defensive tackles, I think somebody might bring him. Somebody might give him a shot with those long arms and how big he is at 6'7". We had another question. Where was it? Oh, somebody was bringing up Jack Bech. I mean, look, we talked about Jack Bech every single day here on the show so far. I feel like Jack Bech was the biggest winner of any player at the Senior Bowl. Or maybe not the biggest winner, because sometimes we talk about like guys who were rising the most. We already thought that Jack Bech was good, but to me, he was the most consistent player in a great way every single day. He had the best performance, I should say, of any player at the Senior Bowl. Would you guys agree with that?
Yeah. Yeah, I would say so. I think he's locked up at possibly a top 50 pick, not just a day 2 pick. You mentioned it, consistency, and we had a loaded receiver group in the morning practices, right? All the names we've been talking about: Restrepo, Higgins, Noel, all those guys, Tez. Jack Bech in the second practice every single day was clearly the best wide receiver on the field. I mean, and you saw it. You saw route running. You saw contested catches. You saw there was even a play today where, it kind of broke down a little bit. Jalen Milroe couldn't find anybody, and Bech just leaks down the field, down the sideline, finds himself, makes himself available, right? He just does every fundamentally sound thing that you want a wide receiver to do. And I think despite not putting up big numbers for a lot of his career, I think this was his first 1,000-yard season. It was somewhere close.
Yeah, I believe so.
And he brings, I mentioned this to you, it's hard to say really one thing. He brings a little bit of everything, doesn't he? And I think that's going to be something that teams really like. And he's another guy in this class, really solid blocker as a receiver. He's going to be a fun piece to see on a team with a scheme that, it's kind of built around him a little bit, even in the run game. But I think he may have locked up a top 50 pick this week.
He was outstanding. The only guy I would say maybe had a better week was Gray Zabel, I thought, from North Dakota State, because he was unbelievable as well. But Jack Bech, Dalton just mentioned him. There's some guys that have trump cards in this draft. Jack Bech doesn't have a trump card, but he's good at everything.
Yep.
So that's the thing that really he could hang his hat on. And I think Jack Bech, like you said, is definitely one of the better receivers we have in the draft.
I just keep we talk about this guy the same exact way we talk about Chris Godwin. We really do. Not the fastest, a bigger dude, can block his ass off from his tight end days, got super reliable hands after the catch, really savvy route runner, will make the tough catches for you over the middle and in the red zone and even to the sideline. Like, the NFL let Chris Godwin get to the third round. I don't think that happens with Jack Bech. I think he is a second round at worst lock, and there might be a team that convinces themselves that maybe he could be a back end of the first round type of a wide receiver. The Rams are the perfect team, right, for him to potentially be that long-term Cooper Kupp replacement, depending on how much longer he is going to play. But a couple more. One, somebody's asking about Wyatt Milam. He's played a little bit at guard this week. Looked like he struggled, was a little bit up and down. I agree with that assessment. He's taller, leaner, and if he's going to play guard, I think it's going to be a work in progress for him. I think he's going to need to gain a little bit more weight. He's going to have to get more comfortable playing lower, increase that flexibility, get his butt down more consistently. So they played him at guard, but to me it's clear there's some stylistic play where he has to improve if he's actually going to be a solid guard at the next level, which I think is probably going to be his best spot.
Someone had mentioned to us about he needs to be in one of those Shanahan zone run kind of schemes. I think that makes a lot of sense. I think he may, the way he played this week, and I know obviously he's trying to adjust and there's a lot of pressure. Can he stay at tackle? Is he going to play inside? And I think he might look more like a second-round pick right now. And to me, if I'm a team like the Miami Dolphins and I really need interior offensive line help, that might be a place that I go, because he's an athletic guy, right? And we saw it in a diverse run scheme at West Virginia. He was, you mentioned, he was one of the best tackles in the country this season. If he moves inside a guard and he's able to use that athleticism in a zone scheme and then work on the pass protection as we go, that's always going to be a thing, right? Because you've even mentioned he's got shorter arms than a lot of these other guys out here. That might be an issue, something that could be mitigated with a move to the inside. I do think he's going to get drafted as a guard now. I think that's very clear, especially with the way he was used the last 2 days. But that might be another one where if he can get in a certain scheme, he could help a team out.
Last one, somebody's asking about Billy Bowman. I like Billy Bowman a lot. It's hard to quit him.
The ups and downs.
It's been an up and down week. Today was great.
But he had some reps today. Yeah,
today was great. Yeah. I thought they played him in the slot in the red zone period, and not that he won every single rep, but at least there were some where it was really impactful plays. I think he was using his leverage well, using those quick feet. He's kind of like a corner build playing the safety, so it's really a situation where he's put in a really good place to succeed, and I think that he did this week. He showcased some good ball skills as well. He had an interception on day one of practice, and so there have been a couple of reps where, honestly, like, he's had some L's this week. But he has also been able to fight back. When we say hot and cold, I'm not just meaning that as like it wasn't a good week, but I'm trying to be nice to him. It really was a lot of highs, a lot of lows, and it's just sort of a performance that you've got to take both of those things into account with Billy Bowman.
Like we said, I mean, this week for defensive backs, there's going to be hot and cold for everyone, pretty much, right? Because it's not designed for them to really succeed all the time out there. So Billy Bowman, I was really impressed by him. He's had 11 interceptions over the last 3 years at Oklahoma. He's one of the best ball hawks that we have in this draft. He even had that, like you mentioned, that interception on day one that was really impressive. There's a couple times where he got beat initially, and he was so quick to make up ground on it. I think his quickness is unbelievable. His ball skills, his instincts were great as well. I think before I had him as like a projected 4th-round pick. Now he could be sneaking into maybe the 3rd round day 2.
He's competitive as hell, and he's going to find the football, and he's going to take chances to do it. And I think we saw kind of every bit of Billy Bowman's football personality on the field in these 3 days, because it can be very high, and he looks like the best safety out here, and it can be a little bit low, and he's a little too aggressive. And I think you would rather have a guy like that you have to rein in as opposed to someone who just doesn't leave it out there. He's going to lay it on the line. He's going to go and attack the football, and it's just a matter of using a little more eye discipline, a little more consistently to know when and when not to do that.
Drake, last question's asking, but which team wins, though? Me versus the barbecue that I'm going to eat later today with you guys. We appreciate everybody rocking with us for the last 3 days. We've been covering the Senior Bowl here in Mobile, Alabama. Our coverage of the Senior Bowl does not end here, though, because, of course, we're going to wrap it up with a post-Senior Bowl mock draft. That's the last thing that you're going to see from us this week. For Dalton Wasserman, Max Chadwick, I'm Trevor Sikkema saying we'll see you then for the mock draft.